Joining me on the broadcast from Beijing is WION's correspondent Patrick Falk. Patrick, good morning. We're looking at huge numbers turning out in Hong Kong, defying in many ways what the administration has asked them to do. What impact is this having on day-to-day activities? Hong Kong is a business hub.
Well, I think Hong Kong has been braced for this for the last couple of days. There were calls for people to, as you mentioned a moment ago, close up shops, close up schools and get out and protest. A lot of people think that this is a final fight for Hong Kong. As you mentioned, on Sunday, there were a report, 1 million people that came out to march. There aren't quite those numbers today, but the atmosphere, according to all accounts, is very different. They mean business, and they are angry that the government is pushing through with these proposals. And as we know, they were able to postpone the reading today. We don't know exactly what's happening next, but it does seem certain that the government does intend to push ahead and push this bill through next week when the Legislative Council makes a final decision on this. And like I say, there is an enormous amount of anger that the government is just ignoring what many people in Hong Kong want, and so that is for the bill to be thrown out completely. And it's hard to understand why the Chief Executive, Carrie Lam, is following through with it, given the political crisis that has come out of this and the fact that it's put her credibility under question. That's raising a lot of questions as to whether or not Beijing is pushing the Hong Kong government and the Chief Executive to follow through with this.
All right, and since you did bring up Beijing, if I can ask you, how exactly is China responding to today's renewed strength? We know for a fact that on Sunday it had said that it backs the extradition bill and refused to give any credence to ideas that this was Beijing in many ways strong-arming Hong Kong.
Well, it's interesting, just in the last couple of days, China seems to have gone very quiet on the issue. There hasn't been very much coverage of the topic at all in mainstream media, and there's also been a big clampdown on social media. People's WeChat and Weibo accounts have been shut down or suspended if there's been any chatter about what's happening in Hong Kong, and also if they've been circulating images of the protests from Sunday. As we know, these protests were really quite a remarkable scene, and so a lot of the images coming out of Sunday are going viral and being spread widely across the internet. And that is something that the Chinese government will have concerns about. They don't want these things to be inspiring people here to be coming out to protest. But the media reaction that we saw earlier in the week, accusing foreign forces of stirring up trouble in Hong Kong, is an indication that China certainly wants to see the bill pushed through, and that is an indication that it will go ahead. As you mentioned as well, the Legislative Council is stacked with pro-Beijing lawmakers, so that is possibly why the government is wanting to strike while the iron's hot and get it through while it can.
All right. Last question, Patrick. We know how social media operates in Beijing, but what impact has it had in organizing protests within Hong Kong? Have social media networks been exploited by organizers in getting people together and making sure that they turn out on the streets, as we've seen them this morning?
Well, I think certainly it's common to be using social media to organize events like this, and a lot of the people involved are young people, young students who are very active on social media. So certainly this is not uncommon for it to be happening in Hong Kong. It's in stark contrast to what's happening here in the mainland, because a lot of people are very curious about what's happening in Hong Kong, and people are seeing images of what's happened on Sunday and have been asking questions about it. And there have been people talking online saying that, look what's happening over in Hong Kong. It's really quite amazing, but we can't even talk about it here. So,
Right, we seem to have lost our connection with Patrick Falk, our correspondent there in Beijing. But one thing clear, Beijing isn't happy with the protest. There's been a drop in media coverage altogether of the protests in Hong Kong. Worries perhaps that it may inspire similar demonstrations within the mainland. We'll get you updates on Hong Kong. Remember, it's early days right now. We are expected to see more protests in the coming hours. Let's see how things pan out over the next couple of days.